Hello, and welcome to Magic is Real, a podcast focused on the fascinating world of near-death experiences, spirit communication, and all things metaphysical and spiritual. The mission of this project is to share messages of hope and inspiration with others, and to spread the word that death is only an illusion. Thank you for being here with an open heart and mind. I wish you peace, light, and love always. Hello, Magic is Real listeners. Thank you so much for being here for this episode. I am happy to bring to you today Rex Finfgeld. He is a near-death experiencer, but he's also a human being who is an author. He is a musician. He's a producer. He does all sorts of really cool esoteric things. I'm going to let him share them with you. But a lot of the things that Rex is involved with now really came to him as a result of this spiritually transformative experience. So that's what we're going to talk about today. First of all, I'll just say welcome, Rex. Thank you so much for spending your time with me tonight and with my viewers and listeners. Absolute pleasure. I've seen you around in the community, and now I get to deep dive with you, which is really exciting. So I wanted to start off by asking you about your background. What kind of a kid were you? What were your spiritual beliefs? What were your spiritual attitudes, if any? Let's just start there, and then we'll go into your near-death experience.
Okay. Yeah. As a child, I don't know that I was a particularly spiritual child. My mother, however, always was. I mean, my mom was a very eclectic person. She, took in all ideas, all philosophies, all walks of life. So I grew up with an amazing, amazing mother who had this influence, who was definitely a big influence, especially this part of my life. But as a kid growing up, my parents divorced when I was young. I was bullied as a kid, and I'm from Detroit originally, and so there's a lot of the kind of especially once I got to junior high school, it got to be pretty rough for me, and it was also about the time my parents got divorced. So during my childhood, I was one of those very angry kids. I didn't know how to process it, those kinds of emotions. And it seemed like for a couple of years there, I was going to school and getting beat up and bullied and picked on, and I mean, some really kids can be really mean, and we know this.
Yes, they
And then it comes
can.
to, of course, my mom, when my dad first left her, she had to go through her own healing. And of course, she was, not herself for a little while there. So I'd go to school and deal with all that and come home, and my mom would be a little, she was never abusive or anything, but she would definitely, be hard on us kids sometimes. So those years were pretty tough. So I became a rather angry kid. By the time I got to high school, it wasn't like I was some great fighter or anything like that, but I was just known as a kid with just a really bad temper. And I got to where I would, sometimes lose my temper and like punch walls and, stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, I was a nice kid. I mean, I got along with most people and things like that. But as far as spirituality goes, for a lot of my childhood, I didn't believe there's anything beyond this. I mean, my childhood was not a very happy one. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's great memories there and great people in my life. I don't want to take away from the parts that really were good, but because of the parts that weren't, I just had a hard time believing in anything good in the world. And even as a child, I hate to say it, but I even thought about suicide as a child. So, and I think in some ways what stopped me from doing it was because I was afraid of what was beyond, because I had no idea. I didn't know, and I wasn't sure that I really wanted to know. And I thought, my gosh, what if it's worse than this life here? And so I just, kind of just plod through it. I didn't exactly do well in high school. The only reason I graduated high school is because of my mom. Ultimately, I would say my mother and I got really close. My brother, my mother, and I, we were really close. She used to call us the team, and she died when I was 22 in 1988. And she was my best friend in the world. My mom was fantastic, and I'm, once we got past the divorce stuff with after my dad left, she became this most beautiful soul. She became our best friend. She had this incredible knack of being able to be our best friend, but also be a mom at the same time. When she had to go crack the mom whip, as it were, we all listened. Even my friends, even when my mom got serious, everybody listened. Okay. My mother's name was Michael. Yes, as in a man's name, Michael. But her nickname was Miss Mike. And so a lot of my friends, when my mom, decided to lay down the law, everybody just stopped. Okay, Miss Mike's talking, everybody be quiet, kind of a thing. But she commanded that kind of respect. But she was also the kind of person that had this huge, huge love. She was such an incredible person that if she wasn't even my mom, I would have been grateful to just have this person in my life, because she was just really such an incredible, beautiful, loving soul. And she was like stepped up and was just there for everybody. And this is the kind of person I grew up with. When I was 18 years old, and I think this is about when I started to maybe come around a little bit. My birthday's on Halloween, but when I was turned 18 years old, my mom was seeing this really amazing, I guess, psychic reader, astrologer, whatever word you want to use for it, and just incredible woman, just very deep, just insightful person. And her name is Corrine, and she always fascinated me. And as I got to be a teenager, got to that point in my life, I was getting past, the anger that I had when I was in junior high and first getting into high school. So I started to keep an open mind about, well, maybe there is something more. Plus, I actually had experiences as a kid growing up with spirits, with ghosts. I had a few times where I actually experienced something that's at the time to me was very unexplainable. So I couldn't dismiss that either, because to me it really happened. It wasn't just something I dreamed about. It wasn't just some little fantasy or imagination. I really experienced this stuff. So by the time I got to being 18 years old, my mother gave me, it was one of my gifts, a reading with Corrine. It was an astrological reading. She did my natal chart and broke it all down for me. And the reading itself took like 2 hours. She did the chart, of course. Back then, we didn't have the computers and everything we have now. So she did it all by hand. I mean, the woman was just brilliant. And I remember it as being really deeply, incredibly intrigued by the experience. And I really felt like Corrine and I had really, really connected. And it was one of those moments in my life where I think I maybe started to wake up a little bit, started to really embrace that, okay, there is something more to this. And, there is a God, and God, I think, is loving. Because like I said, I had a hard time wrapping my mind around it because, other than my mom, my family, just and some of our really wonderful friends, but there was just so much else that was just really, really, that was very difficult, especially, like I said, especially during junior high and first getting into high school. But by the time I got through this reading, I remember coming home after that. My mom and I had a great big long conversation about it. All of a sudden, the wheels started to kind of turn for me, and I started to just keep a much more open mind about the possibilities of things. So, over those next few years, I had gone. I decided my mom actually kind of helped encourage me to get me to college because, like I said, I wouldn't have even graduated high school if it wasn't for my mom. She made me just promise, Rex, if you do nothing else in this life, you got to graduate high school. And I would have dropped out. I just didn't like being there. I did not like high school culture. I didn't fit in. At least I didn't feel like that I did. Now I look back and I see it a little bit differently than I saw it as a kid. I mean, I'm not looking at it through the eyes of an angry kid anymore. I mean, I'm looking at the eyes of the person that I am now. And I realized I missed a lot of opportunities because I was just so caught up in myself and in my head and these hard feelings that I missed a lot of things that were right there around me. But at the time I didn't see it. So there was still that bitterness that lingered. But as I became an adult, I went to college for a couple of years, at least up until my mom passed. I had a good job. Actually, I was a stockbroker back then. At 21 years
Really?
old, I passed the Series 7. Not because I had a degree and I was, had the education for it at that point, but I just worked really, really hard to study. And I took me 3 times, but I did pass that Series 7 and I became a stockbroker. And the time my mom died, I was actually making 6 figures and had a nice condo I was living in, nice car and all that stuff, everything that a young man could want, and looking like I had a very, very bright future ahead of me. And spiritually speaking, I was becoming more and more open-minded. I was embracing God. Plus, I'd had a girlfriend. My first real girlfriend was when I was 19 years old, and she was a Christian. And not that I've ever necessarily been a real religious person, but I would go to church with her and her family from time to time, her parents. And because there were such loving, genuine souls, genuine people, I also took an open mind and and even embraced Jesus. Again, I didn't become a Christian necessarily, but I was open to this idea of, wow, the more I learned about him, I learned about his story. I'm just like, just what an incredible individual he must have really
Yeah.
been. And I understood that he really just represented love, that he was there for everybody. He was not segregated. He was not isolating himself from anyone. He literally put himself out there for all who wanted to hear his message of love. So I couldn't help but be touched about that. So that also, I think, moved me a little bit forward in terms of my openness to spirituality. When I was 22 years old, my mom very unexpectedly died. She was literally walking out to her car from work. And this is one of the beauties of this, don't get me wrong, it was a really sad moment in my life. But one of the beautiful things is right before my mom passed away, she literally was walking to her car. She just got finished with her day of work, was walking out to her car and passed away on her way out to the car. She didn't even make it to her car. And when the ambulance arrived, she was on the ground and it was already gone. And so I remember getting the call that night. And of course, not moments before that, maybe 5-10 minutes before that, my mom and I, because we used to talk almost every day, I'd moved out, I had my own place by then. And we talked still pretty much every day. And I just talked to my mom. So forgive me, but the last thing we said to each other was, "I love you." Ending the phone call, "Hey, love you too." But then I got the call that night that my mom had died, and that of course completely blew me away. And then I had another just, and I had just again a powerful, powerful experience with my mom who had just passed away. She literally came to me in my dream, and I've heard other people say this. She came to me in my dream, and it was the most vivid thing. I imagine maybe you've had these dreams, but it was so vivid. It's like, oh my gosh, this is real. This is really happening. Just like I can feel her, I can hug her, and I could hear her voice, and everything. And she basically just said to me, of course, I'm like, Mom, just please don't go. But she said to me that Rex, it's going to get a lot harder before it gets easier. He said, no matter what happens, it might be a long time in the coming, but just whatever you do, please know it's going to be okay. Please know you're going to get through this. Just please don't lose sight of that. Don't forget this. Please just remember this. No matter what happens, it's going to get just. I don't want to. I'm sorry to say it, but it's going to get harder before it gets easier, and it's going to be a while. But you got to hang in there. You got to get through this because it's going to be okay, and you're going to make it. And it did. My life fell out after that. I lost it after that. My mom was my rock. She was that source of just love in my life. And like I said, I have no shame in saying I was kind of a mama's boy, and I love my mom to the point where it was important what she thought of me. I love that my mom could be proud of me. I meant everything that my mom could be proud of me. And so when she left, let's just say I do have. I'm one of these. I'm the kind of person that I do have darkness inside me, and especially during those years. When my temper would come out, I mean, there was no question. There was a very mean person inside of me for sure. That just went very, very deep. And then we can get into the soul part of that, the soul journey part of that as we get into the NDE. But there was definitely something very, very dark inside of me. And when she passed, all of that came out. And inside of a year, I won't dive into all the details on this, but inside of a year's time, I had gone from everything I described with my condo, my nice job, the six-figure income, my production company. I was doing a lot of cool things at that point, to being homeless and living on the street out of my van that I used to haul my gear in. Inside of a year's time, I lost everything, and I'd been running the streets. I was addicted to. I consider myself what they call a speed freak on the streets, which means you do everything, all those uppers. You do cocaine, and you're doing meth, and various different kinds of speed that were available on the streets at that time. Plus, I did other drugs. I had a big thing on. I love to trip on acid and love to do mushrooms, and I did a lot of those things too. And I did just way too much of everything, especially the coke, the meth, all the speed stuff. I just did that way too much. I would go on these multi-day benders and not sleep, literally for 4 or 5 days in a row, and just have no sleep. And all I would do is just do lines. We call smoking sheets, and popping pills, and all the things that I was doing at the time. And then finally, I would just crash and then sleep for like a day, couple of days, and then wake back up and basically do it all over again. So clearly, I lost my focus, lost everything at that point, and I lost myself completely. Eventually, with a little bit of help from my brother. My brother, of course, was going through the grieving too, because he lost his mom as well. And my dad, who had not really been in my life in a long time, also surprisingly kind of stepped up, and they kind of pulled me out of the doldrums, as it were. And I ended up living in Denver, and I ended up moving to Colorado Springs. And I cleaned myself up off of everything. The only thing I was doing at that time was just smoking marijuana, which, as far as all that stuff is concerned, I mean, that's to me minor compared to the rest of it. And if anything, I will say smoking marijuana helped me get over the rest of it. I don't know if I could have shaken all the things that I do, withdrawals, not just the physical part of it, but the mental and emotional part of it, was the spiritual part of it, which is way more difficult than the physical part of it. Because then what happened is, all of a sudden, I hadn't felt me in like a year and a half. I felt nothing to do with my own feelings and emotions, because all I was doing was just chasing after the high. And for anybody that's been through cocaine addiction, meth addiction, or any of that sort of thing, your life literally becomes either being high or you're looking to get high. It's one or the other. And eventually you're not feeling anything that's your own anymore. It's just all about the drug. And so when I first got off the drug, I realized, oh my gosh, I haven't felt my own feelings in a really long time. And it just all hit me with a ton of bricks. The problem was, I wasn't feeling like I did before. Felt broken. Everything was disjointed and disorganized and confusing. And I'd never felt like that before. I didn't even know how I was going to get through, because I'm just like, I have no idea. This was horrible. And I can't believe that not only that, I had to come to terms with the fact that he completely destroyed my life. I hadn't thought about that either. So once I came off the drugs, I had to think about all the stuff, including losing my life. And then I had to remember all the things I did while I was running the streets, while I was doing the drugs, while I was getting into all the mischief and trouble, if you will, that I was getting myself into. And I did a lot of things during that time I didn't even know I was capable of doing. I mean, there was fighting, there was violence, there was all kinds of things that happened that, again, I had no idea I was even capable of doing, getting into, and just or that I could imagine that I would ever go through something like this. But the truth is, I did, and I had to come to terms with all of that. And again, I had started having those same suicidal thoughts again because I didn't know how to get through it. Now, not only did I have to deal with all this, but I felt really weak and broken. I didn't feel like I had any strength inside of me at all. Of course, my mom was gone. I didn't have her to talk to. And at that point, and I don't think anyone really meant for this to happen, but it seems like a lot of people kind of distance themselves from me. And so I went through this pretty much by myself. I'm glad that my dad was a part of my life, but and we ended up having a good relationship, a good friendship, but he was never somebody I could just go to and really talk to and bare my heart and soul to like I could my mom. And and again, like I said, grateful that he's been a part of my life, but he was not somebody who was there in my childhood so much. Even when my parents were married, he was an over-the-road trucker and was gone most of the week. And when he was home, he slept all the time. So I barely even knew my dad from when they were married. Um, but spiritually, I mean, I was broken. And at that point in time, I did have a belief in what was beyond. And I was thinking about that prospect of, it'd be nice to just go to sleep and just go someplace peaceful. And that I found great comfort in that, believe it or not. But and check this out. What really actually started to get me through is, of course, I thought to myself, my mom would not want me to go out like this. And of course, I'm thinking to myself, my mom must be just so disappointed in me. I know she wasn't. She was with me the whole time. She would never judge me. But at the time, in my mind, I was like, she must be so disappointed. So I was like, I can't go out like this. And so I started taking the baby steps. And little by little, I mean, I got myself a job. I've been a nightclub DJ for a long time. I became a nightclub and concert promoter. And plus, I had jobs in the retail field along the way as well. And I worked in art galleries and worked in a jewelry store selling like diamond jewelry and stuff. And so I started to kind of pull myself together little by little. And it's one of those things, and I say this to people all the time, especially now when I do presentations, like no matter where you are, sometimes take that little step, no matter how small that step is, just take that little step, just start taking some baby steps. Because, after a little while, you look back and you realize, wow, those baby steps are starting to add up. Progress is starting to be made, starting to heal, starting to pull myself back together. So that's what started to happen. And even though I was still pretty angry and still doing things that, when I look back now, I'm really not proud of some of the things that I still did during those years because there's still so much anger going on. The cool thing, though, is I discovered martial arts at that point as well. And I've been a martial artist ever since. I got 30 plus years in martial arts. One of the things I do is I have a couple of students I teach. So I am an instructor and have been an instructor now for about, 15, 16 plus years. But it was the martial arts, believe it or not, it seems kind of counterintuitive because you're learning how to fight in martial arts. But I also learned there's a lot more to it because, first of all, it gave me an outlet for my anger. Now I could go fight. I mean, and plus I got in and I got in the ring. I used to fight in Muay Thai and had other outlets and little things that I got into where I was being able to just take all this really hard energy and just go put it somewhere where everybody was there for the same reason. We're all consenting to fight each other, as ridiculous as it may sound, but nobody was like, involved that didn't want to be involved, and everybody, when you got in there and fought somebody, everybody knew the risks, you were there for the same reason. So I could justify that a lot better than me being on the streets and fighting and getting involved in situations and hurting people in some cases that did not deserve to be hurt, especially given how off over the edge I would go sometimes. But so it also, the other thing about martial arts too is it taught my brain how to work. I in a way I never really, I think, understood like how to think. One of the reasons I didn't do very well, like in high school, I did okay when I got to college. I never got the degree because I dropped out, of course, but I didn't necessarily know how to think. And I was one of those kids that I think my brain just worked different than other kids. I didn't learn the same way other people learned. So martial arts, because of the way my teacher was breaking everything down, of course, it was mostly combat situations we're talking about, but it taught me an awareness and a way to kind of look at situations that I had not thought about before, and a way to kind of like a thought process that I never had developed within myself before, that I thought, wow, maybe I do actually have a little bit of intelligence here. Maybe I can start to understand and figure things out that I never understood and could fathom before. And so it also not only just gave me that physical outlet, but also the mental and emotional outlet in terms of, now I started to understand how to process these things. And it was for the first time I was able to start really thinking about all those horrible things I had done when I was running the streets after my mom died and I was doing all the drugs, and how to process that so I could maybe take some steps towards even at least making peace with it. I wouldn't say I got over it until I had the near death experience. But at that point, at least I was able to learn to live with it. So it didn't burden me so much. It didn't, I didn't have such, I had an incredible guilt, I had incredible shame, this huge sense of self-loathing, again, because I was so mad at myself that I could let this even happen. And, but it helped alleviate a lot of that. And so the martial arts really saved me in a lot of ways. So I did that for a number of years. And eventually I got, I won't go through the whole process here, but I got to Denver and I met this old master. He's about to be 87 in January, from Java, Indonesia, named Willem de Twirs. And it's an art called Kuntao Silat that I discovered in 2002. And it's basically the art of moving energy. It's an amazing, beautiful, incredible martial art. On the one hand, it's what people call battlefield ready martial art. There's no sport to this. It's meant for real world situations. And I teach a lot of different students, and I even including like women's self-defense classes, children, people with disability. I've had a lot of students because it shows people that no matter what happens to you, no matter what happens in this life, you've got options out there. You've got a means to defend yourself. And in this art, it's not about teaching somebody how to win or lose a fight, but to simply survive the situation and maybe get yourself to where you can get away from the situation and go get help or get around people so you don't have to get hurt. Or if you're with somebody you care about, you can protect and put them in a situation where they don't have to get hurt either. And so this is, what I learned to teach. And what I love about this, especially once I had the near-death experience, which happened in 2011, I guess it would have been about 9 years after I was into this art. Believe it or not, I had my therapy. I was blessed to have the best doctors, best nurses, best therapists, because you hear so many medical nightmares out there. And I was so blessed to have the best people that I felt like were really watching out for me. And at that point, I really came to understand the healing side of the martial arts. We call the old master, we call him Uncle. Everybody refers to him as Uncle or Uncle Bill. So he's Willem de Twirs, but he's actually Dutch Indonesian. So he's born in Java, grew up in Holland, and then he and his wife came over to America. I think it was around the early 70s or something like that. And it's something he's always said is that you can't be a real warrior unless you're also a healer. Because a warrior is not about being a bully. It's not about being a tough person. It's not about anything like that. It's about protecting, especially those that can't protect themselves. And if it's not about protecting so much, it's like if you have an opportunity to help heal that person, then you work on them, you heal them. It's not just combat and fighting. It's all about healing as well. So when we break down and understand how the body works, we also do it not just for the purpose of if you have to fight, okay, this is how you break it down, but then also the same movements. And this is what's so fascinating about this art. All the same things that you would do that would hurt and break down the body are the same movements that you would do to also heal the body. But what you're basically doing is slowing them down, and the intention goes from harm to healing. Even something like a strike over the shoulder or something like that, boom, there's a point there. You can just literally drop somebody down to their knees if you hit it just right. But if you're wanting to heal somebody, you take that same, what would otherwise be a strike, be very gentle with it, move your hand through that same kind of a spot. And all of a sudden it relaxes all these muscles, loosens everything up. For somebody like me who gets migraines, it also can help alleviate the migraine because all the tension that goes on, especially the base of the skull, it all starts to loosen up. And that's just one example. And this happens all over the body. I'm not a trained masseuse, but I've got friends of mine right now that like, Rex, my body's hurting. Can you please come over and give me a massage? I've got this one girl who's been one of my beautiful friends, amazing friends for years. And she's got a masseuse she sees like once a week. And we don't get to see each other too often these days, but every once in a while when I see her, she's like, Rex, can you please give me a massage? You have this knack for getting things that even my masseuse can't get. Can you work on me for a little while? And literally it's all my Kuntao Silat training, transferred into healing intention, where I'm able to get these certain spots and dig into maybe some of these knots that she gets in her back. She gets crazy knots in her back. And be able to work through it and loosen it up to where all of a sudden she can move and she's not in pain for at least for a little while. And that's Kuntao Silat. That's the art of moving energy. And now that he's almost 87 now, and all of us in the group are all older. He doesn't take on new students at all. If anybody wants to learn the art, then the person they have to go to one of us instructors. So all the people that are in this group is about a dozen of us. We've been with them for, all of us been with them for 20 plus years. Some of the people in our group have been with them for 35, 40, even one guy is pushing 50 years with Uncle. Long time. And so, he's in his 70s. And so everything is, we kind of joke now, we're all learning old man style. And even at 87 years old, or almost 87, he can't, he doesn't doing jumping flying kicks, because when he was young, he was super athletic. He was just so fast, and he could just move and jump like he just like you wouldn't believe it. I mean, he's just such an athletic person. But obviously, in his 80s, he doesn't do that anymore. But the reason I consider the man a master, never mind his incredible healing ability, because he is an amazing, incredible healer. When he puts hands on you to heal, it's really incredible. You just, I've never felt anything like that from anybody. But it's also because he can get a lot out of a little. So even when he's demonstrating a combat application on somebody, he just barely looks like he's moving. It looks completely effortless. The person on the other side is flipping all over the place, and they hit the ground. And he just kind of looks around, and go, "Oh yeah, hello, nice to see you. What do you think? Any questions?" With a big smile on his face. And it's like, we're all, even after all the years we've all been with him, we're all just still completely blown away that everything is so effortless for this guy. And so it's what a gift that we're his last group, and he's not holding back and teaching us everything that he knows. Now, having said that, I don't know that I'll ever be where he is. I'm just grateful that I'm exposed to this, and I'm getting this information, and I get to train with this really amazing and talented group of people. And it could just, and it's changed my entire life, because when I fell, I broke 20 bones in the fall, including vertebrae, my ribs, my pelvis in 4 places. I destroyed my elbow, and a number of rotator cuff injury, and there's a number of other injuries that came with it. Never mind the massive brain bleed I experienced, because I was in a coma for 5 days. But if it wasn't for this art, don't get me wrong, and also my amazing doctors and therapists and all that as well. But if it wasn't for this art and the fact that I'm always getting to move, and there's Tai Chi that's involved. We're not practicing Tai Chi specifically. We're not specifically practicing Qigong, but all that movement, all that kind of internal kind of energy, and all that breath work is all part of this art. And one of the reasons that, despite having a body full of arthritis, I can move the way I move now, is because I keep working on this art. I stretch every day. I do my forms every day. I do my core training. That just helps keep my body moving. And my doctors, I see my orthopedic surgeon at least once a year, and he's just blown away every year I see him that I definitely have this arthritis, and it's not going away. But over the last probably 7 or 8 years, it has not progressed. I've kept it at bay. So he just keeps saying, "Rex, whatever it is you're doing, you just keep on doing it, because the results are speaking for themselves." He's like, "I just love seeing you every year, because every time I see you, it's just good news. You're doing so amazing." I mean, they were speculating, because of the surgeries I previously had, especially on my elbow, that I would need to be having more surgeries. Once years went by, that I'd probably be needing some more surgeries, and we're not ruling out the possibility that it may still happen. But thus far, I'm not needing the surgeries, because I keep doing what I'm doing, and everything just seems to stay at bay. So I haven't had to go back, especially the elbow. The elbow took massive, massive damage, and it's not perfect by any means. And if you probably can't see it in the video, but I mean, it's kind of been kind of Frankenstein back together. So if you were to actually see my elbow, it doesn't quite look right. But you know what? It works. I can do push-ups, and I can do pull-ups, and I can go dancing, and just and move. And when once I get out there and my body loosens up, it takes a few for my body to loosen up. But once it does, I'm good. If you ever saw me on the dance floor, not that I'm a great dancer or anything like that, but you'd have no idea that I deal with all this arthritis. You have no idea that I have all these broken bones. And then prior to the fall, I had another dozen broken bones. So I'm probably sitting at about 30, 32 broken bones total, never mind tissue tears and everything else that I've been through. But again, it's this martial art training, and also this wonderful therapists and everybody else that have helped me over the years. Plus, I worked hard. I mean, don't get me wrong. All the insight and knowledge that they've bestowed upon me, I use it every single day of my life, so that I can make sure I maintain a certain quality of life, that my body at least works. So,
Yeah.
so of course, spiritually speaking, I mean, all I am is in that space of being now, that space of that oneness. I mean, life happens, and yes, we get hurt, the heart gets broken, and we still have to deal with these kinds of things. But at the same time, at least now I know I have the strength, I have the means, I have the insight, and I'm also feeling very guided. My relationships now are not just with humans and the animals and Mother Earth, but it's also with I've heard you talk about angels and spirits and guides, but I have these relationships with these amazing beings as well. And in my case, I don't look at it like they're just guiding me, but we literally have friendships, so we're here for each other. Even when I've got a great story about an angel being, just for lack of a better, we'll just say she's a beautiful angel, that I have these tracks that I call my angel tracks, because she brought these gifts to me. It's a really amazing story. I don't know if I'm bouncing around a little bit here, but
That's
I guess as
okay.
I'm on the subject, maybe I should
Yeah.
just tell the story. As you mentioned, I'm a composer and I'm a producer, which is one of these post near-death experience discoveries. In fact, I didn't really discover that until about 2018, that, oh my gosh, I can actually write and produce music. And it happened very, very serendipitously, very accidentally, because I wasn't planning on it. I wasn't looking for it. It literally just happened. And of course, when it did, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can write music. I totally embraced it, but totally carpe diem with it, and just, haven't stopped since. But I love, I'm a night owl because my life has always been at night. And plus, for whatever reason, since I had this traumatic brain injury, my sleep has been terrible for the most part. And I have found the only way I can get consistent sleep is literally when I lay down about 6 or 7 in the morning and get up about 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I don't like being a day sleeper. It's very, very inconvenient, especially with doctor's appointments and trying to take care of just other things in life. But at the same time, if it's the only way I get consistent sleep, I do it because when I sleep consistently, my migraines and the rest of the post-traumatic, TBI symptoms, post-TBI symptoms are much, much less. When I don't sleep, if I miss a night of sleep, then all of a sudden I'm migraine central, and I can be down for days with this stuff, and it's terrible. And so because of that,
Yeah.
I accept being a day sleeper.
I'm a migraine sufferer too,
Oh
chronic
my God.
migraines, and so I know sleep is vital,
Vital, then I'm so
vital
sorry you have to deal with that. I don't, gosh,
too.
I just don't wish that on anybody. That's I've been through so much pain in this life, and that probably is the single worst pain I've ever experienced, is migraine pain.
Yep,
Nothing worse, especially when it
I
goes
know.
on for days. But
Yep.
as such, being a night owl, I love to walk, I love to go jog. And so most of the time, especially in the summer, because I can't deal with heat, I'm crazy heat sensitive, especially since the TBI. I mean, I literally can just go into like just this heat exhaustion like in just no time. So a lot of my walking I do at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. A lot of my jogging is at late night.
Wow.
I'm out for a walk at like 3 in the morning, and I'm walking through the section of just where it's next to a road. First, there's like pretty much no traffic, and there's just this row of houses. There's a lot of trees. You can see some of the fences that surround the houses. And as I'm walking up the street, I'm all of a sudden hearing like somebody whistling. I thought there was somebody whistling. Then I hear somebody humming. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. I know somebody's maybe out in their back patio. I don't know, maybe just relaxing in the late night, kind of doing what I like to do. Um, and they're just humming, they're just whistling. And I was like, oh, what's a really cool melody? It was really catchy. And in my mind, I just couldn't help but just keep hearing it. I'm like, wow, that's really, really cool. But I was literally audibly hearing this because a lot of my communication with these beings is more extrasensory. I
Yeah.
don't always have the physical elements to it. It's more, I envision things within, call it the mind's eye, however you want to put that part of it. But this was audible. I was physically audible. And as I'm walking, even outdoors, I've got this incredible fragrance of cinnamon of all things, which is probably one of my favorite scents, one of my favorite tastes. I love, love, love cinnamon.
I
And
do too.
oh, nice. So, but as I'm walking, but what was weird about this initially is that I'm walking up the street, and I'm several blocks up the street, and I'm still hearing it. I'm like, wait a second. And then there's nobody around me.
Yeah.
I stop and I'm looking around. There's nobody around me. Again, and of course, I can't really see much of the trees. It's dark, of course. I can't really see too much of the trees. And I'm thinking, what is this person doing? Are they walking through people's backyards and walking with me, and whistling and doing this humming still? And it's like, okay, whatever, cool. I was really enjoying it because it was very pretty. And I kept on going and kept on going, but it was very also kind of somber too. At the same, it was kind of sad and somber. One of those things was very sad and very beautiful at the same time. And as I get closer to home, and it's like a mile up the street, I'm still hearing it going, come on, this is nuts. What's going on? I stopped again. I'm looking around, and I'm like, okay. Then it hits me. All of a sudden it hits me. There's a being with me. And I could feel it was a feminine energy. And I am, this, regardless of being a man, especially since the NDE, I'm very, very connected to the divine feminine. And just real quick, to me, goddess, it's feminine to me before it's masculine, because it's the feminine that's the giver, that's the birther, the creator, and that which gives rise to creation itself. It is that birther, creator, giver energy, which to me is feminine. And so that to me is, again, I understand the duality of it all. And as a man, of course, the divine masculine certainly has its place, and it's obviously very important as me being part of the experience and part of the duality of the experience. But to me, the feminine is the core; it's the source. Um, and so I have a lot of my experiences are with that feminine energy, and it was, and I could feel this very beautiful but very profoundly sad. This, just again, lack of a better word, we'll just call her an angel. But she was sad, and I could feel she was on the verge of losing hope herself. And I was in a space myself at that point, because this path has been brutal since a near-death experience. I've been, honoring what I feel like, guidance and spirit, the angels. Everybody's been saying this is where you need to be. This is what you need to be doing. And every fiber of my being reflects that, because I can't imagine doing it being anything else. But I could feel, you hear the story, sometimes angels fall, and I felt like maybe she was on the verge of that. And I also felt within myself, because I just, doing what I was doing, I just didn't feel like the doors were opening. It seemed like I had a lot of people that had, we've all been through this. I'm not alone here, but sometimes you go through these periods in life where people that love you, they look you in the eye and tell you how much they love you and are there for you. And, you love them back, you're there for them. You have these beautiful experiences together, and they turn around, put a dagger in your back. They turn on you and things, and of course, one of the things about my post NDE life is that my sensitivities and my empathy are just freaking crazy now. They didn't increase like double or triple. They're exponentially more powerful. I've never ever in my life imagined feeling things the way I feel them now. Even 11 years later, I'm still kind of acclimating to this. I joke that even with my 56 years of life experience, I'm more like an 11-year-old, because I'm just 11 years old in this new reality, in this new paradigm I've been experiencing since the NDE. So needless to say, getting back to this angel, I could feel her, and I felt her struggling, and I was struggling too. And I was just like, what am I doing? And I don't want to go so far as to say I was having suicidal thoughts, but I was also having thoughts of, can I just come home? If I can't find love, I'm here for love. I'm not here for anything else. I want to enjoy the physical things. I want to enjoy, people, and even successes, and being able to travel and do things that I've never done in my life. I'd love to have all those things, but it's not like it's necessary. And I'm in a space now where I'm perfectly at peace, that if I go to sleep tonight and I don't wake up, that's okay. I'm absolutely at peace with that, because all I really desire in this life, or life in this period, because there is life and then there is life. And I'm sure you can relate to that idea. When we die, you don't die per se, the body passes, but life goes on, that the soul is forever. Not forever, I should say it's timeless.
Mhm.
But I could feel her, like I said, on the verge of falling, and I was on the verge of falling myself. And by the time I got back to my place at the time, again, that smell of cinnamon was really, really powerful. And I just wondered if, the people, my roommates, they were cooking something that night, which of course they weren't. It was really late. They're sleeping. And so I'll just, go to my room, and it's just such a powerful scent. And I'm still hearing her in my mind now. I didn't hear the audible part of it anymore, but she was with me. We're connecting, we're exchanging with each other. And she felt my pain. I'm feeling her pain. And I work on a piece of software called Ableton. And I hadn't been working on it for very long. It wasn't that long after I discovered that I could write music. And I decided, it was real late. I was getting very tired, but I didn't want to lose the melody. So I went ahead and opened up Ableton, and I wrote the melody. I just made the melody, and I knew the piece of music would come. So I made the melody, so I made sure I had it. So when I got up the next day, first thing I did was work on that piece of music. And the first piece of music is called Broken Hearted Angel, because it reflects the pain, the darkness, the somberness of where we both were, what we were both feeling at the time. And it's a beautiful piece of music, but it's also very dark and very sad. If you were to hear the music, it's edgy. It's kind of got a hardness to it, but at the same time, it's also got a distinct softness, angelic softness to it. The melodies are her melodies. But the thing that's interesting about it is it wasn't as much a matter of her. Of course, in the matter of the melody, she gave me that specific melody. But as we wrote the piece of music, she wasn't telling me what notes to write or anything like that. It was more a matter of us infusing our energies together, and this is what came out. And then from there, I wrote 2 more pieces of music. They were much brighter, much more beautiful. Oh, sorry. Stuff it just moves me so much. Even, sorry, forgive me, myself here a little bit. But I wrote these 2 more pieces of music. The next piece of music was called Healing Hearts, very appropriately titled. The next piece of music is called Paradise Found. And I tell people these are my angel tracks. And so the first one, again, it's got this inherent darkness because it's very sad, it's very somber, it reflects the idea and the feeling that we're both on this verge of just falling, at that moment, and just kind of wanting to just let go and just kind of, just like I said, just be beyond all of this and just go home and be in love. That's all we just both just desired, and we're just needing so much. It's just, we just need to be just feeling love. And I think we found it with each other in those moments. We lifted each other up. It's like, which I appreciate, is because the angels, yes, they're here for us, but at the same time, even in our little human form, we're here for them too. I mean, I learned from that, never mind how powerfully empathetic I had become. I can imagine being such a being as an angel, and the empathy they must feel. I mean, what they go through, they feel with us. It's not like they're protected by, being in the light space, protected by heaven, if you will, being home, or whatever term you want to use for that. Because they everything we take on, all of our sadnesses, all the pain in the world, these angels, these beings, these spirits, if you will, they feel every single bit of it with us. And it's no wonder sometimes angels can fall. And it's no wonder so many what we might think of as demon and devil beings were angels. This is love. They're not existing without love, but the relationship love has just become very, very pain filled, and as a result, they become very, very twisted as the result of it. So it comes out in these very vile and very dark ways that we perceive devils and demon type beings as being. And I realized, this is part of my soul journey. That was part of my soul journey, and coming out of the depths of the darkness as a result. But this angel being and I, we have this incredible friendship now. And these pieces of music, and it's neat because when people hear them, I've heard comments without even telling the story, without even sharing the story, like, wow, there's just something really magical about this piece of music. I'm really feeling something very loving and very deep about this piece of music, and it's really touching me. And then something else, go ahead and launch in to tell them the story about the angel and what happened. And they're just like, wow, that's incredible. And another element about this that's really fun too, that I almost forgot to bring up. I played in this group that we now is called Naga. And at the time when this happened, it was the beginning of the pandemic, and everybody was isolating, and nobody could go out, nobody could really see each other. But in order for us to be able to still make music together and be able to share with other people, we would go to a park that was not too far from all of our homes. Really beautiful park, kind of a little gem here in Denver. Not many people even know about the place, but it has a fantastic view of the Front Range. And even at 4th of July, you can see every 4th of July fireworks show in the city from this park. But we started playing there, a couple of times a week, just so we had an outlet for music and a chance to get together. And one of the times we had gotten together, it was right after this happened, and I was telling everybody the story about the angel, and that I was writing these pieces of music that were becoming my angel pieces because I hadn't fully written all the music yet. And all of a sudden, that same just really powerful scent of cinnamon came over everybody, and everybody's like, wow, I can smell it, I can smell the cinnamon, it's really incredible, I could feel her with us. And several of my friends that are very, very sensitive in their own rights, very, very deeply spiritual in their own right, was like, wow, Rex, I can feel this, I can tell she's with us right now, that's really incredible, this is so cool. And even a couple of the people that were there are also part of my band now. A couple of years later, it's evolved and morphed into this really beautiful project. And one of the members, her name's Katie. She's a lead vocalist and one of my best friends in the world. We still talk about it once in a while, but that's that day we could feel the angel. And what was also cool is that we would play under these trees where there was all these cicadas that would just. I mean, cicadas make a lot of noise anyways, but when we were playing music, they were singing with us. And especially when the angel came, there was just such a powerful and moving moment. The cicadas were singing so loud. It was almost louder than the music we were playing. It was just so powerful, so loud, and just I guess profound in the moment. Just incredible. But yeah, I'm just kind of going off here, but to kind of give you a sense of some of these, especially post NDE experiences that have just opened me up to where I describe, when I get into the NDE, the moments of being close to death itself. A lot of NDEers talk about how they went to a place and they came back. I guess in a way I did the same, but when I went to this place, I guess you could say the proverbial lights went on and they stayed on. I'm still there. I'm still experiencing on all of those levels of being and all those levels of consciousness that I experienced while I was in that near-death state. And I guess in a way I'm still there while I'm here experiencing as a human being again. But all that is still completely on. It's all still with me. And that's where the music comes from. I think I mentioned I have these like ideas now about existence, consciousness, the universe, the multiverse. And I have ideas that might potentially explain dark energy and what dark energy is. And there's a lot of cosmological concepts that I'm not a scientist. I'm just a guy that hit his head really, really hard that I can explain, that I have people in my life that are like, wow, Rex, those are really amazing ideas. And one of my friends actually said that, one of these days, if you can get this in front of the right scientists, right physicists, this could even have Nobel implications one day. And it's possible that I'm really explaining dark energy. I mean, I'm sure people, maybe they're like, this is crazy. You're just a guy that had a near-death experience, but it's opened up all these ideas because I keep having these incredible visions. And I've learned over the years that anytime I don't listen to these visions, anytime I go against my intuition, my empathy, I always end up looking back going, oh, darn, I really should have listened. So no matter how illogical it may seem to my human brain, I just do it now. It doesn't matter, no matter how illogical, how much it may not make sense in the moment. I just listen and I follow suit. Now every single time I look back and go, wow, I'm so glad I did. So having said that, I really feel like I've got something that can contribute to not just the world of science, but to spirituality, just to our understanding of existence in general that came because of this near death experience.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. You have a really interesting story. I mean, even apart from the near death experience, which I'll have you go into, I just wanted to just comment on a couple of things. One is just the story of resiliency, and I love a good story of overcoming, but I also love a good story of a change of heart, of a recovery from that anger place and from that trauma place that you came from,
You.
and just how you did so well for yourself, and then you weren't healed, so you fell back into the darkness, and then but you lifted yourself out of that, and it really does feel, and we'll get into this more because, uh, there's a lot of spiritual energy around you too, because I feel it really strongly, and I also, like, I know your mom is a huge part of that,
She's
but,
one of my angels for sure.
yeah, I mean, I feel so much energy, like, just listening to you. But also it does feel like your soul for sure chose this, but we'll get into all that because I know that people will wonder, first, how did you fall out of a tree? What were you doing in a tree? What were you doing in a tree, Rex?
That is always it's funny because every time I do a presentation and I start to tell the story, and when I mention a grown man falling out of a tree, the attention goes from what happened with the NDE to how what
It's
what
like,
was a grown
let's
man
go
doing in a
back a
tree.
second.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm like,
yeah,
yeah.
of course. Now, being a martial artist, climbing has always been one of my hobbies. I don't climb anymore. It's more a matter of promises to certain people because they're just more concerned that they don't want to see anything like that ever happen again. But of course, being in Colorado, I mean, I used to go rock climbing all the time, and I love to go climbing mountains. I mean, I've done lots of that over the years, and it's a great way to get really strong, very flexible, very balanced without being big and bulky. I mean, I have respect for them, whatever body type one prefers, respect. But for me, I've always been a tall, skinny guy, and before I fell, I was, I'm 6'4", and I was about 195 to 200, which is not that much for a guy my height. But people would always comment about I'm so much stronger than I look, and I attribute that to not only climbing but also yoga. And
Yeah.
also was I still love yoga. Yoga is fantastic, and I think especially a lot of men, because it's changed. I think a lot of men are into yoga nowadays, but back then nobody, no guys that I knew were into yoga at all. And I'd be like, you guys, you have no idea how incredible yoga is and how strong against balance, flexibility, core strength. It's incredible for all of that stuff. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here about that. But but yeah, so but trees are all over, and because sometimes Denver's not actually in the mountains. It's just right along the Front Range. It's
Hmm.
just east of the Front Range, so it's not technically in the mountains. You got to drive a little bit, not far, but a little bit to get into the mountains and go climbing. But trees are all over, and plus they're alive and they're organic, and I have relationships with plants and trees as well because I can feel their energy and I can feel their life essence, and I can feel the complexities of their consciousness as well. So I love to climb trees for that reason. And I happened to be in a cottonwood tree, which at the time I didn't realize could become brittle if they get dry. We were having a very dry spring in Colorado. Typically, springtime in Colorado is very wet. We get a lot of snow. Most of our snow and rain comes typically during the springtime. In this particular spring, it was in 2011. It was a very dry spring, and I didn't realize that cottonwoods have a tendency to get very, very brittle. So I just was climbing one of my favorite trees, a tree I climbed many, many times. It was after a training session I had with my teacher, uncle, and because the sessions were so early in the morning, and of course I being a nightclub and concert promoter and a DJ all those years, my life was at night. So typically I'd go to class with next to no sleep, if any sleep at all, and after class I'd usually just go home and sleep it off. You go home and just crash for the day. But on this particular day, I was feeling really energized. I was feeling really good. We had a really amazing class, and I went for a run. And on my way back, from my run, I saw my favorite tree. And I'm like, yeah, why don't I go for a climb before I head back home? And I got up into the tree, and I was, trying to be, I generally was careful. But as somebody who liked to climb, I like to kind of move through the tree certain ways. But a couple of branches broke on me. So I was climbing and one branch let go on me. I started to go down and I grabbed a second branch to try to keep from falling, and it broke too. And I went straight down to the ground. There's no branches in the way, nothing broke my fall. and it's kind of not maybe haha funny, but I hit a concrete bike path, and the bike path is like 6 or 7 feet wide. Either side of the bike path is grass, and there's also a creek not very far away from that as well. But of course, I had to hit the concrete, and I mean, my memories of that of falling are kind of spotty. I do have recollection of it, but they're kind of spotty. Um, but and according to my records, everything in my record says everything from 20 to 30 feet. But I think it was the first responder report, it specifically said 26 feet. So that's usually what I go with. So as far as I can tell, I fell 26 feet, especially when you look at the spot where I fell. I go back and visit it once in a while. I mean, it's up there. I mean, you look up at the spot, you're like, geez, I fell from there. It also says in my records, because I don't remember this specifically, but it says in my records that I hit the concrete head first. And the reason I
The
know that
worst way you could land
yeah,
onto
the worst way I could
concrete.
possibly. I don't think I went straight down on my head. I probably hit at an angle, and then I slammed down the left side of my body because all my broken bones were all on the left side of my body. My broken ribs, the breaks on my pelvis mostly were on the left side. I broke my fibula in my leg. It was my left leg. My left elbow was destroyed. Damaged my shoulder really bad where I had torn rotator cuff. So all the damage was on the left side of my body.
Because you would have broken your neck if you landed straight on
Well,
your head, I
apparently
think, right?
I cracked vertebrae as well. Luckily,
Mm.
not bad enough that I ended up paralyzed or anything, thankfully, but apparently I cracked, I think, 5 vertebrae as well. But it turns out there were a couple of girls. There was nobody in the park that day. When I went for my run, I think I passed maybe like 1 or 2 people, and that was it. Nobody was in the park. A pretty good sized park. But it turns out there was a couple of high school girls that were walking, and they were probably a good 75 plus yards away from me. They just happened to be looking at me, watching me climb when it happened. And so
Wow.
when I fell, they saw me fall, and they apparently had cell phones with them. Somebody made the call right there to call, call an ambulance. And if they had not been there, because I had internal bleeding in one of my lungs, had they not been there to
You would
call
have
the authorities, I
died.
would have bled out in the path and I would have died right there. So that
That's
was
what
kind
I
of
was
a
thinking when you're telling the story. I'm like, who saves him? How does he get out of that when you're
yeah, well,
in the
that's what happened
wilderness?
just by chance. There were like 2 high school girls that saw me fall and called the authorities the moment they saw me fall. Because had they not been there, I would have bled out. I was explained to me, Nurix, you had massive bleeding inside your lung there. And one of the complications when I was in the coma for 5 days is that I crashed a bunch of times apparently because my lungs kept filling up with blood. So if they weren't there, I would have died for sure right there. Probably wouldn't even lasted an hour. And so thankfully they were there and they saved my life. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them. Um, so yep, they got me to the hospital, and yeah, I had 20 broken bones in the fall. I was in a coma for 5 days. I had the bleeding in the lung, massive bleeding on the brain, enough that actually I got a scar up here that I'm sure you can't see in the video, where they actually drilled a hole in my head.
Oh,
I think part
wow.
of it was to relieve the pressure, but it was also explained, and I don't know exactly what the test was, but they also used it as a means of, I guess, scanning or testing my brain. Not an EKG, another type of test. Again, I'm not being a doctor, and I don't remember all the details about this, without going back into my records. But so needless to say, yeah, there's a lot of reasons that it could have died, and I know that it was explained to me after by a couple of my doctors that even when when they first brought me in, they didn't think I was going to make it. I mean, I had such heavy bleeding on the brain. Most people with that kind of bleeding don't survive, and even plus I contracted pneumonia, and I guess anything that could have gone wrong the first night basically did. Um, but apparently when it looked like I was going to survive, when it like accepted I was going to survive, and I was getting to the point where before I woke up from the coma, I guess it was explained to my brother when they finally tracked down who I was, because I was a John Doe for several days. They didn't have my ID on me or anything, so they had no idea who I even was. So eventually, when they tracked down my brother, they explained to him that when somebody has the kind of bleeding in the brain that I had, they usually come out of it as a vegetable or very severely handicapped. Now, obviously, I have some serious issues, and my brain does not work the way it did before at all. But clearly, I have a quality of life. There are things
Mm.
in which I can do. There's even some things in which I can excel, like the music and like getting into these concepts of consciousness, existence, and the perspective multiverse and things like that. And my connection now to spirit, to angels, to guides, and my mother, and all kinds of anybody that's from my past that has passed that I can still feel with me now, because it literally has become just a matter of a thought, and I can be there, and I can be with anybody whom I choose. If I think about somebody, even a figure from our past, even I don't know, even somebody like Prince, and I use
Hmm.
that as an example because it sounds crazy, but I've communicated and experienced with Prince since he's died.
Yeah.
And I don't say that a lot because sometimes it's like, oh yeah, he's a
People
star,
think,
but you know what?
yeah.
But he's still a being. He's still a soul, and even like Cleopatra, Mark Antony, and beings from all the way back to those years. Now, the soul part of the being certainly is experiencing in other realms and probably has many lives here on Earth as well. But the reflections of those beings still exist, and if you want to connect and be in touch with one such being, it's just a matter of just opening up to it and being there. And I don't want to, I'm not going to get into what other people do that are channeling and whatnot. I can only
Right.
speak from my own experience because I don't channel in the classic sense. And as a result, I actually did readings for a while, but I stopped doing that because I didn't feel like it was, I don't know, in a way, I think people were moved by it, but I don't know that it was helping in the way that I wanted it to help. I was hoping it for it to help. So if I
Yeah.
can't be, productive or positive something, then I just pick my spots upon which I use it or even talk about it. And in my case, it's not a matter of maybe waiting for somebody to come to me, because it's just, you just reach out and guess, you match a certain frequency is what it is. I mean, you hear Tesla talk about, if you really want to understand this is a paraphrase, of course, but you want to understand the nature of the universe, think in terms of frequency, vibration, and energy, right? And I've learned that connecting with, again, even soul beings, spirit beings, it's frequency, it's matching frequencies. You just, I go into a certain space, and it's innate, it's very instinctive and intuitive. I feel what that sense of where I want to be in that thought, in that, what you might call the akasha, which to me is not a series of records, it's a field unto itself. And the akasha is not just about the past, it's about all the possibilities and probabilities of our existence, all of it. There is, and it is unto itself timeless. So it's everything. And quantum theory is called the unified field. I feel like that really is the scientific expression for the akasha.
Hmm.
Of course, that gets into the idea that a lot of what quantum theorists and cosmologists are getting into nowadays is information that's been on planet Earth for thousands of years. It's been with the Kabbalists, it's been with the Vedas, it's been with native peoples, it's been here for hundreds, if not thousands of years. We're just, maybe in some way, science is actually catching up to that, not the other way around.
Right. That
So,
makes sense.
and which is why I love quantum theory so much, because it allows for these possibilities. And there are now scientists, quantum theorists, that are talking about the unified field as a field of consciousness, like Jonathan Hagland, Amit Goswami, Sir Roger Penrose, of course, Sir Stuart Hammerhoff, and some of these folks were even in the film What the Bleep. And that's where I
Mhm.
started to hear, the first connections of the idea of the unified field and consciousness being one and the same. Because to me, consciousness, the Hindus have a great expression, and I think Stuart Hammerhoff actually made this expression in the film, that consciousness is everywhere. It's everything. It's not produced in the brain. The brain is a transceiver of the conscious experience. And so when I think about the unified field, think about the Akasha as a field of consciousness. It is alive, it is vibrant, and it's dynamic. Every possibility and probability of the experience, every timeline, if you will, is inherent in this field. That's why we talk about, sometimes, people think, I've talked to somebody not too long ago who's what he calls himself a determinist. I respect that, but in his mind, everything's already determined and done. It's like it's like, on the one hand, you're right, but at the same time, it's probabilities and possibilities. There are multiple timelines at work here. Nothing is static and set. Now, grant you, we're on a path, and if you stay on that path, yes, these series of things are going to be determined because of the vibration and all these components that come into work that create these outcomes. And if you stay with it, sure, in that regard, it's determined, but it's not static and set. It's not like a one size fits all. It's not a cookie cutter kind of thing where you can say you can't shift that vibration, shift that energy, and move yourself to a different vibrational path. And now you've got a different set of factors that might now be determined, if you will. So destiny to me is a choice. Free will is a real thing, but it's something that we have to move upon, and we choose. You can have this destiny and still never live up to it, and never rise up to it. And I know again, speaking from my own experience, I realized that without this near-death experience, I might not ever be on such a path, because I didn't make the decision to say, okay, what is my best self? What am I really here to do? What is truly meant for me? What is my highest path in this life? And I think rising up to that is what I would, at least for me, is rising up to your destiny. And when you do that, then yes, there's that determinism factor kind of comes back into play again. And this is what's going to come out of it. This is what's going to be, this is what's going to happen as a result of taking these steps on this path in the here and now. That
I
makes sense?
Yes, because it's my favorite thing to talk about. Although, excuse me, I shifted my weight.
Okay.
I appreciate you sharing that because I'm so fascinated with quantum physics, but I'm not able to articulate it the way that you are, but I find that fascinating and validating. And I just wanted to, and I really appreciate you sharing that. And I just wanted to go into when you're in this coma, at what point do you have, because I know people will want to know what happened when you did have that near death experience
Okay.
um, in the moment. And then, of course, all of these other insights have come sort of as not a direct result, maybe you can speak to that, but it
Sure.
feels like there's so much knowledge that you have. But I'd love to know when you sort of when exactly you crossed over across dimensions or whatever you want to call it and how.
And I think it's kind of cool that, this being very organic, of course, that we're going to, get into
Yes.
this later in the conversation, because a lot of times this is like the first thing we'll get into. I get into when I have these with the conversations like this. But I like that we can go at it in this perspective, because this is going to kind of like tie it all together.
Me
As
too.
far
That's
as
yeah.
when it happened, I have no idea. All I can say, did it last the entirety of the time that I was in the coma for those 5 days? I don't know.
Yeah.
All I can say is, for me, it was just a moment. I felt like I was experiencing this just a moment. And in that moment, again, it was timeless. So for all I know, in terms of actual chronological time, it may have been 5 days long for all I know.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just in one of the crashes that I experienced. Maybe I was so close to death in one of those crashes that that was the moment it happened. I'm not sure about that. But all I can say is this: for a moment, and I have a spoken word performance that I do based on this, that people seem to really enjoy, because I talk about it in the context of this is what we all are. It's not just me. This is what we all are. So, okay, for a moment, check this out. This is, I don't know, this is fun. For a moment, imagine all of the expanse of the universe, or even a multiverse, all at once as a singularity. And imagine in that moment all of time, past, present, and future, like we talked about in that field, is timeless. It's all at once in that same singularity. And also imagine in that moment every probability, every possibility, every potential for parallel universes and multiple realities are one in that moment. And imagine in that moment infinite dimensions all at once, just for a moment. Now, this is the most important part of that moment. That the source of all of that, while I mean, having this experience, was the most pure and profound love, the most authentic and just sensitive, true love. I think we all have an idea what we're talking about, but one could experience in that moment. But I explain it like this: I was not experiencing love. I was love. Also understand too, in this moment, I was not feeling like I was alive. It wasn't a question of being alive or dead, if you will, but I was life itself. And also taking that into consideration, I was not having an actual experience per se. I was not thinking. I was not a collection of thoughts. I was the mind, the thought, the imagination that gives rise to creation itself. That's what I was in that moment. I was pure soul. I was pure source. If I dare say it for a moment, I was God. I was goddess. But again, it's not because of anything about me that's special. This is the source of what we all are. This is our true self. This is true us in the purest sense of us, the I am. And that's where I was.
That is so powerful and so eloquent.
Thank you.
So eloquent. You know, when you were talking about your brain injury, and you're like, my brain doesn't work the same. But I was like, well, one thing you didn't lose is your ability to articulate so beautifully these concepts, which can be heady to grasp. I mean, it's like they're so beyond the paradigm of what we here in the 3D understand. And you explain it in a way where I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I just
It
finished what
resonates.
it resonates. I just finished watching the movie. I'll probably get the title wrong, but it's Everything Everywhere All at Once, at once.
Ooh,
Um,
I like that.
you have to see it if you haven't seen it.
I
'Cause
haven't.
it's about this.
If you
It's
think of it, maybe email it to me or something when
I
when you're
will, and
finished.
I had to just I'm just putting this out there because I feel like everyone who's interested in this should watch it. I mean, and a lot of people have. It's brilliant.
Oh, one
And
that
it only
sounds
gets more brilliant, but it's recent, but you do have to, I think I bought it on, it wasn't on Netflix, I had to buy it on Prime, but it's about this, and it's done so well, and it only gets better
wonderful.
as the film goes on. So I'm just putting that out there because I want to share it with everyone
I would
who's
love to
not
see that.
aware.
This a title
Oh,
alone totally
so
resonates.
many, I mean, yeah, people kept telling me you have to see it, and it took me forever, but it's incorporating everything that you're talking about. You're gonna love it.
Oh,
And,
beautiful.
it's just so brilliantly done. Jamie Lee Curtis is in it. Just
Oh,
little,
I love her.
but
She's
she's
awesome.
amazing in it. But, so yeah, that's what's so fascinating too, is that so many people have these near-death experiences, and some people have just that experience, which is not just, it's everything, but who have the experience of pure being, pure understanding. I think it's Dr. Eben Alexander who even talks about when he was in his coma,
Right?
there were periods of just nothingness. And it sounds really grim and depressing, but it's not. Because when you're in that state, you're totally comfortable in it. It's not right. I mean, it's not like, oh, this is so boring. It's this wisdom, this knowledge, this feeling of understanding your part in the universe. Expand on
Something
that
I
in
like to
any way.
say about that is
Yeah,
that it's in that nothingness is everything.
it's everything, right? That makes sense, right? So I think he said it was like a dark space, and when we hear that, we're like, "That's terrifying." But like you said, no, it's everything. You're exactly where you need to be.
Totally, you're totally just yeah, just harmonizing, synchronizing, synergizing, just one. You again
Yeah.
that ultimate state of I am, and we are in that oneness.
Yeah. And did I read this somewhere? Was this your only near-death experience or out-of-body experience, or did you continue to have them after this accident that you had?
I have that's it's once the lights went on, they've stayed on. I
That's
don't
yeah.
have it's just it's an ongoing thing now. I mean, it doesn't go on or off
Yes.
anymore. I'm just there. And
And you
I
can
had some things
yeah.
happen, prior to the near death experience that I could say were spiritually transformative experiences that I may in some ways prepared me for this.
Yeah.
One of those probably being that reading with Corinne that I told you about. That's probably the first time I think I reached out and touched something that was beyond, beyond me and beyond this life. But interestingly, one of the most powerful, I guess, STEs that happened during those very dark spaces I went through, especially when I had just first, cleaned up off of all the drugs and I was starting to get my life back together, is I was on, believe it or not, I was on a psilocybin mushrooms.
Mhm.
And I actually went to the mountains, believe it or not, with my dad. My dad has always been kind of a very open person about a lot of things, and always listened to a lot of really cool music. And one of the reasons why I think I listen to some of the, more cutting edge styles of music I like even now is partly because of my dad, because he was always into the underground stuff. And but anyways, we went up to the mountains because he was all really, really into four wheeling and off roading and stuff. So he had a very tricked out vehicle that could just take us places that you just couldn't go without a vehicle like that. And we found this really gorgeous, amazing place, and we both ate a bunch of mushrooms, and we did it actually 2 summers in a row, and both times were very transformative. But anyway, he decides to take off and go walking, and he disappeared for like 8 hours. I didn't see him. And once the mushrooms started to hit me, I didn't want to go anywhere. I just wanted to sit still and just go be. So I actually put myself up on top of a rock where I had this fantastic, phenomenal view of just mountains all around me. There's like this sort of kind of valley in front of me, and the next range of mountains in front of me. There's mountains to my left and to the right. And it was such a clear day that to myself, I could see all the way down to the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, which are in New Mexico. So that's how clear the day was. It was so beautiful, just a few clouds in the sky. And all I did was just sit there for the entire day. And for the first time in my life, I could feel the heartbeat of the earth. I could feel Mother Earth. Sorry, here I go again. It was so moving to me that I could feel how alive she was, how loving and beautiful she was. And I had an experience also, it was kind of incredible, that I remember kind of laying back on the rocks at one point and just looking up into the sky and watching the clouds. And in Colorado, we have we do have some eagles out here, but we mostly have like red-tailed hawks, and they're big, beautiful birds in their own right. They're incredible. There's our markings. They're just very distinct, just really just graceful birds. And I remember laying back and looking up into the sky, and I could see these three hawks all flying around up in the sky, and and it was really cool because I remember watching at one point their wings were folding in, and I remember watching one of the hawks starting to fall, and I'm like, "Does something happen to the hawk? Is the bird okay?" And all of a sudden the wings just opened up. It wasn't even that far above me, just flew right by me, and it just flew back up again. And with that, another hawk did the same thing. His wings kind of folded up, started to kind of fall, and then all of a sudden its wings opened up and just went flying right by me. I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And then for the moment, I let go of my body, and I was up there flying with the hawks, and I was flying through the clouds. I could feel the air streams shifting and changing, and I could just feel this connection I had with these hawks. It was just so beautiful, and I'd never had anything like this happen before, especially in nature. And I was connected to Mother Earth, and just in a way that I'm not sure I can put into words, was communicating with her, and just experiencing with her and experiencing with these hawks. And at one point, I remember sitting back up, and one of the hawks flew down in front of me, literally landed like 5 feet in front of me, like right in front of me, this big, beautiful, gorgeous bird. And he was just such peace. And I was I think of that state that I was in, just such peace myself. We just hung out there. I mean, it felt like it might have been 5 or 10 minutes. I mean, he didn't just land and take off right away. We just hung out there for a little while. He just kind of, and again, in a way we're communicating, not non-verbally, of course, but there was like a communication. Like we just kind of understood each other. We were kind of one with each other for that moment. And after a little bit, we took off, just opened up his wings and took off and flew away. And without the birds, flew around the mountain, and they were gone. But I just remember just being like, wow, this was the most beautiful thing. And of course, here I'm in just, again, I'm tripping, but now I'm crying tears of joy and love and happiness, because in the middle of one of the darkest, most, just broken down periods of my life, I felt like Mother Earth reached out to me, just reminded me, hey, this is what life is supposed to feel like. This is what we are, this is what we really are. And just please focus on this and don't lose this, So that was one of those things that totally was huge part of my shifting. And what was interesting was back in those early years when I was doing all those drugs, and I would trip on, especially acid, and I'm sure a lot of people, and I know people that will say they had STEs through tripping on acid, and I can understand that. For some reason, I didn't. Whenever I would have these powerful like trips, these incredible, crazy visuals when I was tripping on the acid, I thought, wow, this is incredible. I wish I could take this with me when I'm not tripping, but I never could. So when the trip was over, all of that ended too, and I just went back into that funk that I was in. Now, the thing about this, at least this time around with the mushrooms, even though the trip had ended, I'd gone back home, and even days, months, and years after to this day, I think one of the reasons I could experience my near-death experience the way I did is because of these moments that I had on mushrooms, because it didn't stop when the trip ended. The thoughts, the revelations, the feelings, the connection to Mother Earth continued. I never stopped feeling her after that. I could feel her pulse. I could feel how alive she was. I could feel her love every day after that. I knew she was always there. And that was one of the most powerful things that kept me going and kept me, okay, now I need to learn more. I need to grow more. I need to understand more, because this is real. And with that, I started to really embrace true spirituality. I mean, in a way, people sometimes don't understand, well, you did it on a drug, so it can't be real. It's like, you know what? I don't care if it's ayahuasca, peyote, even if it is on acid for some people, because some people say they had revelations on acid. I'm not going to argue with anybody about that. Whatever opened you up, whatever put you in that space, if you came back and you're sober and you're still feeling it, still thinking it, and you're still resonating on it, then it's as real as any moment in this life.
Right. I actually in college did some acid, some mushrooms, but it was a dark period. I wasn't spiritual. And as I became like a real adult and had my life, I told myself I'll never ever want to touch any drug again. It's not,
Right.
I don't want it in my life. But it's interesting because now, so I didn't for a very, very, very long time
And
do
I'm totally
anything.
sober. I don't smoke weed. I don't
Yeah.
do anything now.
Yeah. And it's interesting because now only recently I'm like, gosh, I always thought I would never touch drugs again. But and I haven't, like fully tripped on mushrooms. I've had micro doses and I've had like a shaman work
And I
on
think
me,
that's
but
very healing when it's done right.
that's the thing, and it was just a very small dose, so I didn't hallucinate or anything. But I will say that when I was in college and I was hallucinating, I just remember thinking, "Wow, look what my brain is doing. It's making me think that I'm seeing all these things." Now I believe, I'm not a scientist or a doctor, but now I really truly believe that some of these substances like psilocybin really just help remove the veil, so that we can actually see what's going on behind the veil. Because even as a medium, I know that I now understand that concept better of
Right.
blending with the spirit world, moving my energy into that other space where I
Harmonizing, right? Vibrational
harmonizing.
harmonizing. Yeah.
And yeah, like, and I remember being in college and seeing, and I was in a with bad people, like
I
bunch
feel
of,
you.
like just not good people, bad energy. but they had an iguana in a cage, and I was looking at it, and the cage literally started to breathe, but not just breathe. I heard it breathing. Like it was like I heard it.
Right.
And I also saw, then I looked out and there was a poster of Bob Marley, and it's where there's all these tigers at the bottom of the poster, and he's singing, but all of a sudden the poster came to life. The cat started walking, and he turned to me and started singing. I heard him singing, I saw him singing, and I thought, wow, look at what the brain can do. But now I really feel like what I was seeing was all the possibility. Like that's not just a
Totally.
if that's energy, that can be anything I want. I don't know how to
It's entirely
describe.
possible you had a moment you resonated, and that spirit of
Yeah,
Bob Marley was actually with you in that
that's
moment,
what I
right?
mean. It's almost like I'm realizing now that it's just sort of deconstructing the
That's a good
illusion,
word. Yeah, totally.
right? Where I'm like, that's energy. We're all moving. This isn't really solid. And so everything starts moving in a different way where I'm like, yeah, there's chemicals in your brain, but I find it so interesting now that I'm more open to certain types of spiritually enhancing drugs. I'm not endorsing them at all because I think it's a slippery slope for a lot of people, but but personally I have this interest in that because I see it so differently now that I'm not in that same dark place I was
Right.
as a child. Now I'm in this place of light and contentment and peace and spirituality where I think it's so interesting to think about how these drugs, these chemicals, these
Well, you've got the intention
components.
of love and healing to put
Yeah,
behind it if you should choose to do something like that. So
right.
it'll have that kind of, that kind of connection as a result.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask
The one
you,
thing I like to say is whatever you're doing is helping you walk the path of love, just keep doing it. It doesn't mean do a bunch of drugs, but if something like that has helped you, then embrace that.
right. I just think it's interesting that it can open us up in that way. I mean, we don't have to do, but just disclaimer, we don't have to do a drug. We can meditate. We can get there in other ways. Um, I
Or if you
did,
do, don't use it as a crutch. Use it as a way
yeah,
to let you know where you want to be. So when you do meditate, you remember, okay, this is where the psilocybin mushrooms took me, but now I know I can get there on my own. And
yes,
sometimes they need to be shown. Like you said, the brain didn't know that was possible until you experienced it. So sometimes the person needs to experience it maybe once or twice to go, you know what? Okay, the brain can do this, but I can learn to do this on my own without the drug. And that's the key. Don't let it become a crutch. Don't become something that you basically, you rely on, but you want it to let it be something that shows you what's possible so you can learn to do it on your own.
so well said. Now I know that we could go on for hours and hours
Oh,
because I'm
easy.
so fascinated, but I'll kind of just for for the interest of in the interest of the viewers, I just wanted to kind of wrap this up by asking you a question that I ask all of my guests, and it's a big question, but it's just the first thing that comes to mind, and it can be as many things as you want. My question is, what do you want people to know?
So just know that no matter where you are in life, no matter where you've been, what you've done, even if it was just as recently as yesterday, you can wake up at any moment and decide to just choose love. And what I mean by that is I mean, is how do we apply it toward the day? I mean, that's a very generalized statement, but how do you choose love in terms of how you approach your relationships, how, your family, your friends, even your dogs and cats and your horses or what have you, how you approach your relationship with Mother Earth, your relationship with the person at the corner store that you see every day, the person walking down the street that you hold the door open for when they walk by you. I mean, what does that mean to wake up? And this is what I think about when I, start my day is like, okay, when I choose love today, what am I going to do? And how do I apply love to that day, to my experiences today? And just know that it's possible any day. And one of my favorites, and I won't dive too much, I know we've been talking a while, but I've had conversations with people that when you meet them and you look at them, you would just never have any idea that these ideas and these thoughts are really inside of them. Like so many of us out there, it's not the person who's dressing that certain way or who's looks spiritual. I mean, I've had conversations with people that have just gotten out of prison and have prison tattoos on their face and things like that because of where I've been. One of the things that my dark spots in my life have become light in my current life is because I can say, hey, listen, I've been down these roads. I know what that's like. I've never been to prison mostly because I never got caught.
Mm.
But the point is that when somebody like that hears that, all of a sudden they become open to, okay, I'm not the only one having these thoughts. I actually had an experience with a couple of guys like that when I was at a cafe where they heard me talking about it. They kind of jumped on me a little bit about it. It took a moment to say, hey, this is where I've been. Plus, I've been through this near-death experience. What would you do if you had to go through something like this? I mean, how strong are you really? And I thought for a second the guy was maybe going to go off on me, maybe even hit me. But it's funny. He looked at me. He goes, you know what? I'd love to be part of this conversation. Can I join you?
Wow.
And again, to meet him, to see him, you would have had no idea. I mean, he looked like he literally just came out of prison. But when he got past all that, and he joined my friends, all of a sudden he was a huge part of the conversation, and just let me know in that moment, it's like, wow, just you just don't know when you see people walking down the street, whether it's a homeless person on the corner, maybe somebody on the corner, is all strung out on something. You don't know what's really going on in their mind and what they might really know, the wisdom that exists inside of them, because they're feeling so alone with those thoughts that they disconnect from it, because they don't realize that there's other people out there that are really with them, and it would share with them if they gave them the chance. So I hope that day he and his friend both, that realized that maybe that was the first time he got to really open up and share that wisdom, because he was brilliant. Once we got past the detention thing that we had, he was absolutely brilliant. And me and all my friends were just blown away by just how amazing he was and the things that he said and he shared, and what a big part of that conversation that he was. I mean, it was incredible. And I hope that was maybe a moment in his life that he could maybe break out of something and realize, okay, there are other people thinking these thoughts, and maybe instead of going down that hard path of being, that now maybe he can start to open himself up and go, you know what, let me explore this part of myself. Let me develop and grow that part of myself, and maybe he can start applying that to his life, regardless of where he's been before. That at any point he could choose, like, I can be a better person. Let me see what that better person, that best person, looks like now. And I hope he did that. I haven't seen him since. I don't know, but I hope he did that. And I think maybe he did, because it was one of those kinds of days where it's just a really powerful day.
Yeah. Well, you have so much beautiful wisdom, and I love your vulnerability and your emotion. So
Thank you.
I welcome tears. I welcome, because it's authentic, it's real. But because you are so eloquent, I want to encourage people to go on your website, which I'll have linked below, to check out your
Wonderful.
books, because that's where you can find all this great wisdom that you've put into these books that you've written. Is there anything else that you wanted to share about what's coming up for you, or services you offer, or books that you have available that we may not know about yet?
Well, I am available for presentations. I'm happy to travel, to do the presentation in person. That's always the best. But I'm also happy to do Zoom presentations. Um, my book is available. It's called My Experiment with Gravity. And the name is a reflection of having fallen out of a tree. The ideas about gravity
It's
in
funny.
multiverse came a little bit later. But it's basically a spiritual self-help book, autobiography that's inspired by my near-death experience. And it is about showing what's possible in terms of how you can change, and how you can transform and choose love in your life. And anyone can do it. It's like, if I can do this, anyone can do it. I have this beautiful music project. I've started with a band called Quantum Beings of the Miraculous in 2014, but my latest project, one I'm most excited about, that seems to be growing, and amazing things are happening, is a band called Naga, which is a Sanskrit expression for serpent. But in the Sanskrit, it's about, of course, destruction, but also about rebirth, creation, and life. So we have been doing, if you're here in Denver, we have this wonderful residency on Saturdays from about 4 to 7, 7:30 to check the name of this place out. It's called the Molecule Effect.
Cool.
It's a location that's in Washington Park. But it's a beautiful residency. It's gotten to the point where it's a packed house every Saturday,
Oh, sounds
and
fun.
it's pure magic. And we just recently got a New Year's Eve gig at an incredible gallery called Lumonics,
Awesome.
Lumonics Light and Sound. All the art in this gallery is based on light. It is so beautiful and so incredible. It's a small venue, just the capacity is limited. So if you're here in Denver and you want to come to our New Year's Eve, get the tickets early, because it's going to probably sell out pretty fast. Metamyth is playing. I'm doing a solo set, my solo art act. I call myself Simply Rex as a solo artist. So that's going on. And of course, I have this store now on redbubble.com, also it's called gravity.life. My website is gravity.life, literally just gravity.life. So all you have to type in, you can see my website. On Redbubble, you actually have to type in DOT for the dot. So it's gravity, DOT, life. And on that site is all kinds of clothing, stickers, coffee mugs. And it's based on quotes that come from my book and come from my presentations. A funny thing started to happen as I started doing presentations, and I didn't really mean for this to happen. I say these things, and all of a sudden, when I see people after the presentation, or even months, or maybe a year later after the presentation, I'll see somebody like, "Hey Rex, you're Rex, right? I remember seeing your presentation." And the first thing they would do is quote me from my presentation. So I realized, just like, you know
Yeah.
what? It needs to go on these coffee mugs. It needs to go on T-shirts. It needs to go on dresses and tapestries and all these different things, so we can get these ideas out to the world. And plus, because we live in, and I mean, I hate to say it kind of, because we live in a capitalized and monetized world, is also a way for me to live, make a living,
Yeah.
and be able to do what I love and do the work that I love. Because I have a second book that's literally months away from being ready for edit. And so for me to be able to do this work, it helps me to be able to make sure I've got a roof over my head and I can work peacefully without having to stress about the things that, like money, which we shouldn't be, because it can be such a
I
distraction
know.
sometimes. And I know most people that hear this are like, yeah, money can really be a distraction. So just trying to make sure that it's never a distraction. I can just focus on this work and hopefully build this into something that goes out all over the world. Because I hope by the time I do finally take the last breath in this body, that hopefully, the ripple effects of my work go out there and everybody around the world are feeling this in the most positive and most loving way. And just realizing that anything truly is possible, not just for us as individuals, but also that change in this whole world is possible. I was just talking with a friend the other night about the Renaissance. Europe had its Renaissance, going through the most miserable period in its entire history, pretty much. But the Renaissance didn't just like happen. It wasn't necessarily just a gradual thing. It was kind of like all of a sudden the lights kind of went on and the Renaissance happened. And all of a sudden, medicine, science, spirituality, art, music, and society in general, all of a sudden just woke itself up, and people were being there for each other, or waking up individually, and all of a sudden people were helping each other, raising each other up. And all of a sudden the Renaissance became a very magical, amazing time in European history. And so now I'm hoping to be a part of what will be a worldwide Renaissance here on Earth. And I think, put that possibility out there, put that idea out there, that let's do this together, because we can't do it alone. We're in this together. We have to do this together. Let's move towards this Renaissance, a worldwide Renaissance. So gravity.life. Yep.
Thank you. I almost don't want to speak after that because I like where you ended that, but I just want to thank you. I want to take the time to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your energy, your light. You're such a beautiful person.
Oh,
This
thank
was
you.
really
Appreciate you.
inspired. I mean, really, this is one of my favorite interviews that I've done. So, thank you so
Likewise, I've been
much.
thank you, and thank you, same to you. And I don't want to like
Thank you.
try to counter a compliment with a compliment, but I
No,
think you're a
no,
very
I get
beautiful
it.
soul, and I'm very grateful you took this
Thank
time with
you.
me today, and that really means a lot. I mean, and anybody who's seen the show, magic is real, because magic is real, and to please support magic is real, support you for sure.
Thank you so much, Rex. Have a lovely rest of your day, evening.
Thank you, and much love to you, and have a great one yourself.
Thank you.